Alright everyone, settle in for tonight's exploration. We're veering off the well-trodden path of heroic sagas and stepping into something a touch more unvarnished. Prepare for a deep dive not into celebrated triumphs but into the forgotten toil and the everyday grit of life, for the child chimney sweeps of Victorian London. That quaint image of a singing, dancing sweep you might recall from popular culture. Well, the unvarnished truth was often a far cry, a daily struggle against soot, suffocation, and societal indifference, and frankly, your modern comforts would feel like a distant, unimaginable dream. So, find your coziest spot. If you appreciate a journey into the raw, unfiltered past, a like on the video would be fantastic, and do consider subscribing for more of these historical reality checks. As always, I'm curious to know where you're joining us from tonight. Drop a comment with your location and time. It's always a highlight seeing our global community. Okay, perhaps dim those lights, let a soft ambient sound fill the room, and let's embark on tonight's rather sobering journey together. Your existence begins before dawn, in the chill of a London morning, long before the city truly stirs. You are perhaps 5, maybe 6 years old, though some are even younger, small enough to fit where adult bodies cannot. The air in your shared hovel, likely a damp cellar or a cramped attic room, is thick with the smell of stale soot, unwashed bodies, and the faint, metallic tang of cheap gin your master sometimes uses to dull his own misery, or yours. There's no gentle awakening here. A rough shake, a harsh voice, that's your alarm clock, signaling another day of perilous labor. You don't remember a time before the soot. It's ingrained in your skin, under your fingernails, in the very fabric of your ragged clothes. Breakfast, if you can call it that, is a crust of stale bread, perhaps a sip of weak, lukewarm tea. Hunger is a constant companion, a dull ache in your small stomach that you've learned to ignore mostly. Your master, often a brutal man hardened by his own difficult life, cares little for your comfort and much for the pennies your labor will bring him. He eyes you, assessing your readiness, a commodity to be exploited. The streets of Victorian London are a chaotic symphony of clattering hooves, rumbling carts, and the cries of street vendors. For you, however, they are merely pathways to the next dark chimney. You trudge behind your master, carrying a heavy bundle of brushes and soot sacks, your bare feet, or ill-fitting, worn-out shoes, aching on the cold, uneven cobblestone. The city's grandeur, its imposing architecture, means nothing to you. You only see the towering chimneys, each a potential tomb, each a source of your meager, dangerous livelihood. The smells of the city are overwhelming: coal smoke, horse manure, rotting refuse, and occasionally, tantalizingly, baking bread from a world away. Arriving at a client's house, often a grand residence of the burgeoning middle or upper class, you are met with a mixture of pity, disgust, or complete indifference by the household staff. You are a necessary evil, a small dirty creature sent to perform a task no one else wants. The kitchen maid might sneak you a leftover scrap if she's feeling kind, but more often, you are hurried through the opulent hallways, a smudge of darkness against the polished wood and fine wallpaper, a stark reminder of the city's underbelly. You are instructed, usually harshly, on which chimney to ascend. The mouth of the chimney looms before you like a dark, hungry maw. It's your workplace, your prison. Your master orders you to strip down to your trousers, sometimes even less, to minimize the chances of getting stuck. The cold air bites at your exposed skin, raising goosebumps that are quickly coated in a fresh layer of falling soot as you prepare to enter. He might offer a gruff, unhelpful piece of advice, or more likely, a threat of what will happen if you're too slow or fail to clean the flue properly. Fear is a constant, cold knot in your belly. You take your scraper and brush, tools that feel oversized and clumsy in your small hands. The first few feet are often the widest, but the passage quickly narrows. You begin your ascent, your knees and elbows scraping against the rough, soot-caked brickwork. It's a vertical crawl, a terrifying journey into darkness and constriction. The soot, dislodged by your movements, rains down, filling your eyes, your nose, your mouth, making each breath a choking effort. The air is thick, acrid, and utterly devoid of freshness. You try not to cough too much, it wastes energy. Imagine the feeling of the bricks, sharp and unyielding, against your raw skin. Your knees are perpetually bruised, your elbows bloodied. The older boys, the veterans of this trade, have developed calluses, but your skin is still tender, still easily torn. Each upward movement is a struggle, a testament to your desperate will to survive, or perhaps just the fear of the master's reprisal if you falter. You can hear his muffled shouts from below, urging you on, impatient for the job to be done. The darkness inside the flue is absolute, a suffocating blanket. You rely on touch, on the feel of the chimney's contours, to guide you. Sometimes, a narrow bend, or a sudden obstruction will block your path. Panic can easily set in. You might get stuck, your small body wedged tightly, the walls pressing in on all sides. This is the sweep's nightmare, the dreaded stick, where a child could be trapped for hours, sometimes fatally. Your only hope then, is the master, or another sweep, trying to pull you out from above or below, or worse, breaking through the chimney wall. The soot is not just dirt, it's a toxic cocktail. It's acidic, abrasive, and filled with carcinogens. It burns your eyes, making them red and watery. You inhale it constantly, and it lines your lungs, leading to a persistent, hacking cough, known as the sooty cough. Your nostrils are perpetually black. You learn to close your eyes as much as possible, to breathe shallowly, but there's no escaping the pervasive. It becomes a part of you, a dark shadow you can never fully wash away. As you ascend, you scrape and brush, dislodging great quantities of creosote and soot. This is the valuable stuff, the soot gold your master will sell as fertilizer. It falls past you, sometimes in heavy clumps, threatening to knock you off your precarious holds. You must ensure the flue is clear, otherwise the chimney won't draw properly, and a fire hazard will remain. The responsibility is immense for someone so young, the consequences of failure dire, both for the household and for you. Sometimes a chimney has been neglected for too long, and the buildup is thick and hard, like a black, brittle stone. Your small tools feel inadequate. You might have to use your hands, your fingernails, to chip away at the stubborn deposits. The effort is immense, your small muscles straining, your breath coming in ragged gasps. Sweat mingles with the soot, creating a greasy, irritating paste that cakes your skin. You are a tiny miner, chipping away in a vertical, black coalface. The heat can be another torment. If a fire has recently been burning in the hearth below, the chimney can retain a dangerous amount of warmth. The bricks can be hot to the touch, searing your already tender skin. The air becomes even more stifling, a baking oven of soot and trapped heat. Dehydration is a constant risk, but water is a luxury seldom afforded during the climb. You push on, driven by the need to finish, to escape the inferno. And then there are the vermin. Rats, spiders and other creatures often make their homes in the dark, undisturbed recesses of chimneys. You might disturb a rat's nest, an angry, hissing creature scurrying past your face in the pitch blackness. Or a spider, large and unseen, might drop onto you. These encounters, though fleeting, add another layer of terror to your already nightmarish task. You learn to flinch, to expect the unexpected. Reaching the top is a moment of qualified relief. You emerge into the daylight, blinking against the sudden brightness, a small blackened figure against the London skyline. For a moment, you can breathe air that isn't saturated with soot, though the city air itself is far from clean. You shout down to your master, "Allah," or a similar cry, signaling that your ascent is complete. But the job is only half done. The descent is often just as perilous, and then there's the cleaning of your tools and yourself, if permitted. The descent requires a different kind of caution. You can't see where you're putting your feet and hands as easily. You slide and scrape your way back down, controlling your speed to avoid a dangerous fall. The soot you dislodged on the way up now coats the walls even more thickly, making purchase difficult. You are tired, your limbs trembling with exertion, but you know any carelessness could lead to injury, or worse. The master is waiting below, and his patience is thin. Once you're finally out, you are a spectacle of filth. Covered head to toe in thick greasy soot, you look more like a creature from the underworld than a child. The household staff, if they encounter you, will likely shoo you away, or stare with a mixture of revulsion and pity. You are acutely aware of your state, the shame of your dirtiness a heavy cloak, even though it is the mark of your trade, the source of your meager keep. Your master inspects the flue, or simply collects the payment. Your reward is often nothing more than the avoidance of a beat. He might give you a small piece of the earnings, if he's in a generous mood, but more likely, it all goes into his pocket. You are his property, his tool. Your well-being is secondary to the profit he can extract from your small, nimble body. This is the cold, hard economic reality of your existence. The collected soot is bagged, another heavy load for you to carry. Sometimes you have to transport these bags for long distances, your small frame struggling under the weight. The soot itself is valuable, sold to farmers for fertilizer or to tanneries. You are part of a grim recycling system, processing the city's waste, your body the primary machine in this dirty industry. You see little of the profit, but bear all of the risks. Illness is rampant among chimney sweepers. The constant exposure to soot and harsh conditions leads to a host of ailments. Eye infections, skin diseases, and respiratory problems are commonplace. The dreaded chimney sweep's cancer, or sootwort, a painful and often fatal scrotal cancer, caused by the carcinogens in the soot lodging in the skin, is a particular horror of the trade, often manifesting in adolescence or early adulthood, a deadly legacy of your childhood labor. Your skin is perpetually irritated, chapped, and often infected. Sores and lesions are common, particularly on your knees, elbows and other points of contact with the rough chimney walls. The constant abrasion and the toxic nature of the soot mean that even small cuts can become dangerously infected. Hygiene is a luxury you can rarely afford. A proper wash is infrequent, and even then, the soot seems to cling to you, a permanent. The physical deformities are another cruel mark of the trade.
The contorted positions you are forced into, the heavy loads you carry, and the repetitive strain on your young, developing body can lead to stunted growth, twisted spines, and deformed joints. You might see older sweeps, men who survived their childhood in the flues, now crippled and broken, their bodies a testament to years of abuse. This is your likely future, if you survive that long. The psychological toll is immense, though rarely acknowledged. You live with constant fear, discomfort, and the knowledge of your own disposability. The darkness, the confinement, the threat of getting stuck or falling, these are daily realities. Play, education, affection, the normal components of childhood, are alien concepts. Your world is one of harsh commands, aching limbs, and the pervasive choking presence of soot. You learn to be stoic, to suppress your emotions, to simply endure. There is little camaraderie among the younger sweeps, only shared misery and competition for the master's meager favor, or to avoid his wrath. Older sweeps, the climbing boys who are now too large for the narrowest flues, might show some kindness, or they might bully you, seeing you as a reminder of their own painful past, or as a threat to their own diminishing usefulness. It's a brutal hierarchy, with the smallest and weakest at the very bottom. Food is scarce and poor, your diet consists mainly of bread, potatoes, and occasionally, some scraps of meat or cheese. Malnutrition is common, further weakening your already stressed body and making you more susceptible to disease. You dream of food, of warmth, of a soft bed, but these are fantasies, far removed from the cold hard reality of your daily grind. The gnawing hunger is a constant backdrop to your existence. Sleep is a brief respite, but even then, you are often cold, sharing a cramped, dirty space with other boys, or even animals. Your bed might be a pile of soot sacks in a damp cellar, offering little comfort to your aching body. You cough through the night, the soot in your lungs never giving you peace. Dreams, if they come, are often of falling, of being trapped in the suffocating darkness of a chimney. There are no holidays, no days off, unless you are too sick to work, and even then, your master might force you. Sickness means no income for him, so you are pushed to your limits, and often beyond. The relentless nature of the work grinds you down, day after day, week after week. The seasons change, but your routine of soot and suffering remains depressingly constant. Winter is especially harsh, the cold seeping into your bones, making the chimneys even more forgetting. The public's awareness of your plight is minimal, or willfully ignorant. Some reformers, like Jonas Hanway in the late 18th century, and later Lord Shaftesbury in the 19th century, campaigned for your protection, for laws to prohibit the use of climbing boys. But progress is slow, resisted by master sweeps, who rely on cheap child labor, and by a society that prioritizes its clean chimneys over your well-being. You are out of sight, out of mind. You might hear whispers of these reform efforts, of machines invented to clean chimneys without the need for children, but these offer little immediate hope. The laws are often poorly enforced, and masters find ways to circumvent them. For you, trapped in the daily grind, the prospect of rescue seems remote, almost mythical. Your reality is the next flue, the next climb, the next mouthful of The master sweeps themselves are often products of the same system, former climbing boys who manage to survive and establish their own grim businesses. Some might possess a degree of understanding, a flicker of empathy for what you endure, but for most, the trade has hardened them, erased any compassion. They see you as they were seen, a resource, an expendable part of the machinery of their livelihood. Economic necessity, they might argue, justifies the cruelty. You learn to read the chimneys. Some are straightforward, relatively easy climbs, others are treacherous, with sharp bends, unstable brickwork, or dangerously narrow sections. You develop a sixth sense for danger, a primal instinct for survival, honed in the unforgiving darkness. But even the most experienced climbing boy can make a mistake, or be caught out by a collapsing flue, or a sudden chimney fire. Death is an ever-present occupational hazard. Consider the irony, you are cleaning the conduits that bring warmth and comfort to the homes of others, yet you yourself are often cold, wretched, and utterly devoid of comfort. The hearth, a symbol of domestic bliss for the families you serve, is for you the entrance to a place of torment and danger. This stark contrast underscores the deep social inequities of Victorian London, a city of dazzling progress and abysmal poverty. The smells you encounter are not just sometimes a chimney is connected to a kitchen, and the faint, stale odors of past meals cling to the walls, a ghostly reminder of food you will not taste. Other times the smell is purely industrial, acrid and chemical. Each chimney tells a story, a silent narrative of the lives lived around its hearth, but you are too preoccupied with your own survival to decipher it. What about your clothes? Usually a pair of ragged trousers, perhaps a shirt so worn it's more holes than fabric. These offer little protection from the cold, or the abrasive bricks. Shoes are a luxury. Many boys work barefoot, their feet calloused and cut. When you are ordered to strip for a narrow flue, your vulnerability is absolute. The soot works its way into every pore, every scrape, every raw patch of skin. The only skill you are learning is one that slowly kills you. There is no apprenticeship for a brighter future here, no pathway to a better life. If you survive to an age where you are too big to climb, your prospects are bleak. You might become a master sweep yourself, perpetuating the cycle, or drift into other forms of unskilled, poorly paid labor, your health already compromised, your body prematurely aged. The rare moments of kindness are like tiny, flickering candles in an overwhelming darkness. A sympathetic cook who slips you a piece of bread, a brief respite between jobs where you can huddle with other boys and share a moment of exhausted silence. These are fleeting, but they are all that stand between you and complete despair. They are a reminder that somewhere, humanity still exists, even if it rarely touches your life. You see the city from a unique perspective, its rooftop, a sprawling panorama of slate and tile, punctuated by countless smoking chimneys. But there is no romance in this view for you, it is merely a reminder of the endless work, the endless flues that await your small tormented body. The rooftops are not a place of escape, but an extension of your vertical prison. The laws, when they are finally passed and more rigorously enforced, such as the Chimney Sweepers and Chimneys Regulation Act of 1840, and later, more effective legislation in the 1860s and 1870s, come too late for many. Generations of children have already been sacrificed to the city's insatiable need for clean chimneys. Your individual story is one of countless similar tales of suffering, largely unrecorded, largely forgotten. Imagine the feeling when a law is discussed that might free a flicker of hope, perhaps, quickly extinguished by the reality that your master will ignore it, or find a loophole. The economic forces are too strong, the societal indifference too entrenched. For many climbing boys, freedom would only come through death, or by growing too large for the narrowest passages, at which point they were often cast aside. The concept of childhood, as a time of play, learning and innocence, is a cruel joke when set against your reality. Your muscles ache, not from games, but from hard labor. Your mind is not filled with stories and lessons, but with the geography of flues and the fear of your master. Innocence is scoured away by the soot and the daily exposure to brutality. You are an old man in a child's body. You might witness accidents, another boy falling, or getting stuck. The screams, the desperate attempts at rescue, the grim aftermath. These events are seared into your memory, a constant reminder of your own precariousness. There is no safety net, no compensation for injury. If you are hurt, you are a liability. If you die, you are easily replaced. The Victorian era prided itself on progress, on industry, on its moral rectitude. Yet this system of child torture flourished in its very heart. It's a stark reminder that societal advancement can often coexist with profound cruelty, especially when the victims are voiceless and powerless. Your suffering was an inconvenient truth, easily swept under the rug, or rather, up the chimney. The few shillings you might earn, or that your master earns from your labor, are a pittance when weighed against the cost to your health, your life, your soul. But in a world of desperate poverty, even these meager sums can mean the difference between starvation and survival for a family. Sometimes parents themselves sell their children to master sweeps, an agonizing choice born of unbearable hardship. The transition out of the life of a climbing boy, if it happens, is not a gentle one. You are thrust into a world for which you have no skills, your body often broken, your lungs scarred. The soot may be washed from your skin, but its effects linger, a permanent shadow over your future. The memories of the darkness, the confinement, the fear, these too are indelible. Think about the sounds, the rasp of your brush against brick, your own ragged breathing, the distant, muffled sounds of the household below, your master's impatient shouts, and the silence, the terrifying silence when you are deep inside a flue, alone in the suffocating blackness, a silence broken only by the frantic beating of your own small heart. These are the soundscapes of your youth. The master's tools are not just brushes and scrapers. Often he carries a small bundle of straw and a match. If a boy is hesitant or gets stuck, the master might light a small fire in the hearth below. The heat and smoke intended to encourage the child to climb faster or free himself. This practice, known as firing the chimney, is barbaric, a testament to the depths of cruelty you face. The houses you service range from modest dwellings to the grandest mansions. Does the opulence of the rich households make your own poverty feel more acute? Or perhaps you are too dulled by exhaustion and misery to register much beyond the immediate task, the immediate pain. The contrast is there, however, a silent commentary on the vast gulf between the classes. Your hands are your primary tool. They become gnarled, calloused, and permanently stained black. The skin cracks and bleeds, you lose sensation in your fingertips. Holding anything delicate becomes difficult. These are the hands of a laborer prematurely aged, robbed of the dexterity and playfulness of childhood. They are a visible symbol of your stolen youth. The notion of home is a bitter irony. The place you sleep is not a sanctuary, but merely a place to collapse before the next day's ordeal. There is no warmth, no comfort, no loving presence. Home is just another facet of your bleak, deprived existence. You are, in essence, homeless, a transient cog in a brutal machine, even if you have a designated hovel to return to. Personal hygiene is a near impossibility. Access to clean water is limited, and soap a luxury. You are perpetually filthy. The smell of soot and stale sweat clings to you. This makes you an object of disgust to many, further isolating you, reinforcing your status as an outcast, a pariah in the society you unwillingly serve. Consider the rare occasions when a chimney is on fire, and you are sent up to try and extinguish it from within, or to clear a blockage that is causing the blaze. The danger is magnified tenfold. The heat is intense, the smoke blinding and suffocating, the risk of the chimney collapsing immense. These are desperate measures, and you are the desperate tool employed. The lack of sunlight contributes to your poor health. Spending your working hours in darkness, and your brief rest in squalid, poorly lit rooms, deprives you of vitamin D, weakening your bones, making you more susceptible to rickets, and other diseases of deprivation. You are a creature of the shadows, literally and figuratively. The songs and folklore that sometimes romanticize the chimney sweep, portraying him as a lucky, nimble figure, stand in stark, grotesque contrast to your lived reality. These cultural depictions serve to sanitize the horror, to make it palatable to a society that prefers not to confront the ugliness in its midst. Your life is no merry song. If you are injured, there is no medical care, beyond rudimentary, often harmful, folk remedy. A serious injury means the end of your working life, such as it is. You might be cast out onto the streets to beg, another piece of human refuse, in the sprawling, indifferent city. Your master has no use for a damaged tool. You might occasionally encounter children from the households you service, clean, well-fed, dressed in fine clothes, perhaps playing with toys you can only dream of. The gulf between your lives is unbridgeable, a chasm of social standing and fortune. Do you feel anger, or just a dull incomprehension at the unfairness of it all? The constant coughing, the chest pains, the shortness of breath. These become your normal state. You don't know what it feels like to have healthy lungs, to draw a deep, clean breath. The air of London, already polluted by coal smoke, is for you a particularly toxic brew, when mixed with the concentrated soot of the chimneys. Your entire sensory world is dominated by the chimney, the feel of rough brick, the smell and taste of soot, the profound darkness, the muffled sound. This is your universe. The world outside, the world of sunshine, clean air, and laughter, is almost an abstraction, a place you briefly pass through but never truly inhabit. The emotional blunting is a survival mechanism. If you allowed yourself to feel the full weight of your misery, the fear, the injustice, it would be unbearable. So you learn to shut down, to become numb, but this numbness comes at a cost, eroding your capacity for joy, for connection, for hope. It is another layer of the damage inflicted upon you. Sometimes, a flue is so narrow you can barely squeeze through even when stripped. Your shoulders are pressed, your chest constricted, you have to exhale fully to gain an extra fraction of an inch. Panic is a constant threat, the fear of being irretrievably wedged, of suffocating in the tight, black passage, your cries unheard or ignored. The only future you can realistically envision is more of the same, until you are too big, or too sick, or dead. The idea of escape, of a different life, is a distant, almost unimaginable fantasy. Your horizons are bounded by the mouth of the chimney and the end of your master's short patience. This is the grim totality of your childhood. As you grow older, if you survive, and become too large for the narrowest flues, your value to the master diminishes. You might be relegated to carrying tools, bagging soot, or assisting in other ways, but the meager earnings you brought in as a climbing boy are reduced. You are then often discarded, left to fend for yourself in a world that has already taken your health and your youth. The calluses on your knees and elbows become thick, like leather, but they still crack and bleed. Infections are a constant worry. The pain is a dull, persistent companion, a reminder of the daily trauma your body endures. You learn to live with it, to work through it, because the alternative is often starvation or a severe beating. And so your days pass, a relentless cycle of darkness, dirt and danger. You are a small, forgotten cog in the vast machine of Victorian London. Your suffering invisible to most, your childhood sacrificed for the comfort of others. The soot on your skin is a mark of your trade, but also a symbol of the grime of a society that consumed its children.
The flickering gas lamps of Geneva cast long shadows at the close of the 19th century, illuminating a world of rigid conventions and prescribed paths, especially for women born into European society. It was a time of corseted propriety, of drawing-room manners, and of destinies largely dictated by birth and marriage. Yet within a villa named Les Nymphéas, nestled somewhat apart from the city's more staid bourgeois enclaves, a mind was being forged in a crucible of radical unconventionality, a spirit that would soon yearn for horizons far beyond the meticulously ordered landscapes of Switzerland, beyond the shimmering, predictable waters of Lake Geneva. Isabelle Eberhardt was her name, though the world, the small, intensely focused world she would choose for herself, would come to know her by others, names not bestowed at birth, but adopted in the searing, transformative embrace of the African desert. Her story was not to be one of gentle artistic pursuits or quiet domesticity, but a tempestuous, often perilous journey into the very heart of the Sahara, a relentless quest for authenticity and absolute freedom that defied every expectation of her era, every constraint of her gender. Born in 1877, Isabel's early life was an anomaly from its very inception, a prelude to a lifetime of defying norms. Her mother, Nathalie Morder, née de Morder, was a woman of Baltic German aristocracy, married to Pavel Karlovich de Morder, an elderly, high-ranking general in the Tsar's imperial army. Nathalie, however, had scandalously abandoned her husband and her privileged life in Russia, fleeing with her children and their tutor, Alexandra Trofimovsky was a figure as unconventional as Nathalie's actions were shocking, an Armenian ex-priest, an anarchist, a nihilist philosopher, and a brilliant polymath. It was he who became the dominant intellectual and paternal influence in Isabel's life, effectively her father, though her biological paternity was, and remains a subject of some speculation, with Trofimovsky himself being the most likely candidate. The household Trofimovsky established in Geneva was an island of fierce intellectualism and social dissent. He educated Isabel and her siblings with a curriculum that was astonishingly broad and rigorous, far removed from the superficial accomplishments deemed suitable for young ladies of the time. Isabel devoured languages with a voracious appetite, quickly mastering Russian and French, then German and Italian. Crucially, Trofimovsky, who had a deep interest in Oriental studies, introduced her to Arabic, a language that would become the key to the world she increasingly felt was her spiritual homeland. She read not just polite literature, but the great works of philosophy, history, political theory, and the thrilling accounts of explorers who painted tantalizing pictures of distant, untamed lands. Voltaire, Schopenhauer, the Stoics, and contemporary nihilist thinkers shaped her worldview. Trofimovsky instilled in her a profound disdain for bourgeois society, its hypocrisies and its materialism. He nurtured her innate fierce independence, her critical thinking, and a restless curiosity that knew no geographical or intellectual bounds. The seeds of rebellion, of a fundamental unwillingness to conform, were sown early and deep, watered by a household that was itself a defiant outpost against the conventional world. Even in her youth, long before she set foot on African soil, Isabel felt an irresistible pull towards Islam and the North African world, the Maghreb. It was far more than a fleeting romantic fascination with the exotic, a common enough sentiment in late 19th century Europe. For Isabel, it was a profound spiritual and intellectual calling, a sense of predestination. She corresponded avidly with scholars, writers, and even military figures who had connections to North Africa. Her letters, penned with an intensity and insight remarkable for her age, already betrayed a depth of understanding and an almost visceral, intuitive connection to a land she had yet to see. The constraints of European life, the stifling social rituals, the corseted expectations that sought to mold women into decorative objects, or domestic managers, felt profoundly alien to her burgeoning spirit. She dreamed of endless, sun-scorched sands, of the untrammeled freedom of nomadic life, of a faith that spoke to her soul with a directness and power that the formal, often sterile, Christianity of her European upbringing never could. She felt with an unshakable conviction that her true self awaited her there, under the vast, indifferent sky of the desert. The first true taste of this longed-for world, the moment when dream began to merge with reality, came in at the age of 20, accompanied by her mother Nathalie. Isabel traveled to Beaune, now known as Annaba, a port city on the coast of Algeria. The impact of this arrival was immediate, overwhelming, and utterly transformative. It was as if a veil had been lifted, revealing a world that resonated with every fiber of her being. The vibrant, almost chaotic cacophony of the markets, the intoxicating scent of unfamiliar spices, roasting coffee, and desert dust, the breathtaking beauty of the landscape unfolding beyond the city, and the inherent dignity and grace of the Arab people she encountered. It was as if she had finally, after a long and weary journey, come home. Here in Beaune, she began more consistently to adopt male Arab attire. This was not merely a playful disguise, nor solely a practical measure for a European woman, wishing to move more freely. It was a profound act of identification, an embodiment of the freedom and authenticity she craved. As a European woman, her movements would have been severely restricted, her interactions limited by a colonial society that was itself rigidly stratified. She would have been confined to European quarters, her experiences filtered, her understanding superficial. But dressed as a young Arab man, the world of the Algerians opened up to her in ways previously unimaginable. She could move with anonymity through the labyrinthine souks, sit unremarked in the smoky male cafes,
listen to the conversations, observe the unvarnished realities of daily life, and engage with men on terms of intellectual and spiritual equality. This assumption of a male persona was a critical step in her journey of immersion. Tragedy, however, soon struck, cementing her break with Europe. Her mother, Nathalie, whose health had been fragile, died suddenly in Beaune in November. Isabel was devastated by the loss of the woman, who, despite her own eccentricities, had been a constant presence and a link to her past. Then, in April 1899, news arrived of Trofimowski's death by suicide back in Geneva, following a diagnosis of throat cancer. These two deaths, occurring in relatively quick succession, severed her most significant remaining ties to the European continent. Though profoundly grief-stricken, Isabel was also irrevocably set on her chosen path. She had tasted the intoxicating elixir of the desert, she had breathed its air, and there was simply no turning back to the gray confines of her former life. The modest inheritance she eventually received provided her with the precarious means to pursue her independent, nomadic existence in North Africa. She fully embraced the name Si Mahmoud Sadi, a male persona that allowed her to shed the skin of Isabel Eberhardt and immerse herself ever more completely in the culture she so passionately admired. Si Mahmoud became her shield and her key, unlocking doors that would have remained firmly closed to a European woman. Her conversion to Islam was not a sudden impulsive whim, but rather the logical and spiritual culmination of years of intense study, introspection, and spiritual seeking. She found a particular and profound resonance with Sufism, the mystical dimension of Islam, drawn irresistibly to its emphasis on direct, experiential knowledge of the divine, its rich poetic traditions, and its often ecstatic, heart-centered forms of worship. She actively sought out Sufi marabouts, holy men and spiritual guides, and visited zawiyas, the lodges or schools often associated with specific Sufi brotherhoods, eager to learn, to participate in their dhikr, remembrance of God rituals, and to deepen her understanding of Islamic mysticism. This spiritual journey became inextricably intertwined with her physical wanderings across the vastness of the Algerian landscape, each informing, shaping and deepening the other. Her faith was not an abstract theological construct, it was a lived reality, a way of seeing and being in the world. Life in Algeria for Isabel, or rather Si Mahmoud, was far from the romantic idyll sometimes portrayed in sanitized accounts. It was a land groaning under the often brutal and always complex weight of French colonial rule, a stark reality that Isabel did not shy away from observing, and in her own way, resist. She saw firsthand the pervasive injustices, the grinding poverty exacerbated by colonial exploitation, the systematic erosion of traditional ways of life, and the cultural arrogance of the colonizers. Her sympathies lay unequivocally and passionately with the Algerians. She chose to live among them, not above them, sharing their hardships, their meager meals of dates and couscous, and their unwavering dignified hospitality. She traveled extensively on horseback, a small wiry figure often alone, cloaked in a traditional burnous, her face with its striking intense eyes, becoming increasingly weathered by the relentless sun and harsh desert wind. She ventured through remote and frequently dangerous regions, places where few Europeans, and certainly no European women, would dare to go. Her writings from this period, painstakingly recorded in journals and later crafted into evocative short stories and novellas, offer a unique and invaluable window into this vanished world. They are not the detached, condescending observations of an outsider looking in, but the deeply personal, often raw, reflections of someone striving with every ounce of her being to understand, to connect, and ultimately to belong. She wrote with a startling, almost painful beauty of the desert, its terrible sweetness, its capacity to strip away all artifice, all pretense and reveal the essential, unadorned core of existence. She chronicled the lives of the people she met, the proud, silent nomads of the deep desert, the learned scholars in dusty zawiyas, the fervent mystics lost in ecstatic devotion, the marginalized outcasts, living on the fringes of society, with a profound and unwavering empathy, capturing their inherent dignity, their quiet sorrows, their simmering resentment, and their remarkable resilience in the face of overwhelming adversity. Her prose was uniquely her own, evocative and lyrical, imbued with a poetic sensibility and a stark, sometimes brutal, honest. She detailed the relentless harshness of life, the hunger, the thirst, the disease, the constant struggle for sheer survival, but also illuminated the moments of profound beauty, human connection, and spiritual insight, that made it all bearable, even at times transcendent. Her travels eventually led her to El Oud, the city of 1,000 domes, a captivating oasis town on the edge of the Grand Erg Oriental, the vast sea of sand dunes. Here, amidst the unique domed architecture and the rustling palm groves, she felt she had truly found a spiritual sanctuary. She connected deeply with the Qadiriya Sufi Brotherhood, one of the oldest and most widespread Sufi orders. The contemplative life, the communal rituals and the intellectual engagement with Sufi teachings provided her with a sense of belonging she had rarely experienced. However, it was also in this region, a place she considered a haven, that her life took a dramatic and nearly fatal turn, a violent intrusion that underscored the precariousness of her existence. In January 1901, while at a zawiya in the small village of Bahima, near Al-Ad, a man named Abdallah ben Muhammad, wielding a saber, lunged at her in a sudden frenzied attack. The motives for this attempted assassination remain shrouded in some mystery and have been the subject of much speculation. Was it the act of a lone religious fanatic, incensed by the presence of a European, even one converted to Islam and dressed as a man, in a sacred space? Was it a personal vendetta, the reasons for which are lost to history? Or, as some whispered then and later, was the attack instigated or encouraged by elements within the French colonial authorities, who were becoming increasingly wary of her influence, her perceived pro-Algerian stance, and her intimate knowledge of regions and peoples often hostile to French rule? Whatever the true motive, the attack was brutal. Isabel raised her arm to defend herself, and the saber blow fell heavily, nearly severing her left arm at the elbow, and inflicting a deep gash on her scalp. She collapsed, bleeding profusely, but miraculously she survived, thanks in part to the rudimentary but immediate care she received. Remarkably, at her attacker's trial, Isabel displayed an extraordinary act of clemency. Despite her severe injuries and the clear attempt on her life, she publicly pleaded for Abdallah's life, arguing against a death sentence. This act of forgiveness, rooted perhaps in her Sufi beliefs about compassion and the renunciation of vengeance, astounded many, both European and Algerian, and further solidified her enigmatic and somewhat saintly reputation among some segments of the local population. It also, however, did little to endear her to the French authorities. The attack and its aftermath provided the French colonial administration with the pretext they needed to deal with this troublesome, unclassifiable individual. Deeming her a disruptive influence, a potential agitator, and an embarrassment, they issued an order for her expulsion from Algeria. Forced to leave the land she considered her true home, she found herself in Marseille. Adrift and despondent, she was like a desert plant uprooted and cast onto barren rock. The vibrant colors, the immense spaces, the spiritual resonance of the Sahara, were replaced by the gray, grimy monotony of a European port city, its bustling commerce a pale imitation of the human vibrancy she had known in the souks of Algeria. She felt imprisoned, her spirit stifled. Yet it was during this period of painful exile that a significant development occurred in her personal life. She reconnected with and married Slimane Iani, a young Algerian Spahi sergeant, a member of a light cavalry corps in the French army, whom she had known previously in Algeria. Their wedding took place in Marseille in October 1901. This union, born of affection but also undeniably one of practical convenience for Isabel, provided her with a French surname and, crucially, French citizenship, through marriage. This she hoped would allow her to legally return to Algeria, circumventing the expulsion order. Her return to Algeria with Slimane was not, however, a return to the same unfettered freedom she had once experienced as the enigmatic Same. Her marriage, while providing legal status and a measure of companionship, also brought with it new complexities and constraints. Slimane was often stationed in remote garrisons, and while Isabel was devoted to him in her own unconventional way, she continued her solitary wanderings and her writing whenever possible. She also began to work more formally as a writer and journalist, contributing articles to French newspapers, often under the byline of Sima. Her unique insights into Algerian society, its customs, and its simmering discontents, were valuable, even if her critiques of colonial policy had to be more veiled, or subtly expressed to pass the censors and satisfy her editors. During this time she notably collaborated with the French writer and publisher Victor Baruchon, who recognized her extraordinary talent and unique perspective. Baruchon became instrumental in getting her work published, both during her lifetime and posthumously. This collaboration, however, was not without its tension. Baruchon, an established literary figure, sometimes heavily edited her raw, passionate and occasionally unpolished prose, to make it more palatable to European literary tastes and colonial sensibilities, a process that arguably diluted some of the fierce authenticity of her original voice. Isabel's final years were spent largely in Ain Sefra, a dusty remote garrison town on the edge of the Sahara, in the Atlas Mountains near the Algerian-Moroccan border. It was a harsh, unforgiving landscape, a place of stark beauty but also of military maneuvers, colonial administration, and the ever-present tensions of a frontier region. She continued to write with a feverish intensity, to observe the world around her with an almost painful acuity, and to immerse herself in the local culture whenever opportunities arose. She often visited the nearby Xur, the fortified villages of the region, and spent time with the nomadic tribes, sharing their black coffee and their stories. She remained a familiar if perplexing figure, Samamud, the slight, intense European, who spoke their language with fluency, shared their customs with respect, and seemed to understand their souls in a way few other outsiders ever could or even tried to. Her health, never particularly robust, was steadily deteriorating. The cumulative effect of years of harsh desert living, inadequate nutrition, the lingering effects of the severe wounds from the assassination attempt, and her documented fondness for keef, a potent form of cannabis, and alcohol, had taken a significant toll on her physically slight frame. She suffered from recurrent fevers, possibly malaria or brucellosis, and was often racked by a persistent cough. Yet she pushed on, driven by an insatiable curiosity, a restless spirit that could not be easily contained, and perhaps a premonition that her time was short. She still dreamed of further explorations, of crossing the vastness of the Sahara, of reaching the legendary city of Timbuktu, but this was a dream that would remain unfulfilled, a horizon she would never reach. The end, when it came, was with a suddenness and a dramatic violence that seemed almost preordained for a life lived with such unrelenting intensity, a life so intertwined with the elemental forces of the desert. On October 21, 1904, Ain Sefra, a town built precariously along the banks of a usually dry wadi, a riverbed, was struck by a devastating flash flood. Unusually heavy torrential rains in the distant mountains, far upstream, had transformed the innocuous dry channel into a raging, unstoppable torrent of mud, water and debris. The floodwaters surged through the lower parts of the town with terrifying speed and power. Isabel was in a small, fragile clay house she rented, reportedly ill with fever and confined to her bed. The waters rose with horrifying rapidity, engulfing the modest dwelling. The flimsy structure, unable to withstand the force of the deluge, collapsed around. When the floodwaters finally receded, leaving a trail of devastation and death, her body was found amidst the mud and wreckage. Sliman Inyi, her husband, had been away on military duty at the time of the flood. He returned to Ain Sefra to find his world shattered, his enigmatic wife gone. Isabel Eberhardt, Samamud Sadi, was dead at the tragically young age of 27. The tragedy of her premature death was compounded by the loss of many of her manuscripts, her precious journals and writings, which were swept away and destroyed by the floodwater. What survived, often in fragmented, water-damaged form, was later painstakingly gathered and published, largely through the initial efforts of Victor Baruchon, and subsequently by other scholars and admirers over the decade. These posthumous publications, including titles such as The Oblivion Seekers, In the Hot Shade of Islam, and her writings on sand, Dans l'ombre chaude de l'Islam, Note, de route, etc., were instrumental in cementing her legend and bringing her unique voice to a wider audience. Yet they also inevitably presented a curated, sometimes romanticized version of Isabel. Baruchon, in particular, took considerable editorial liberties, rearranging texts, combining fragments, and sometimes infusing her work with his own literary style or political interpretation, a process that has led to ongoing scholarly debate about the authenticity and integrity of the published corpus of her work. The true Isabel Eberhardt, therefore, remains elusive, a complex, shimmering mirage on the horizon of history, a captivating tapestry woven from threads of stark contradictions and burning passions. She was a European aristocrat by birth, who transformed herself into a Saharan nomad by choice. She was a woman who lived, loved, and wrote as a man. She was a profound mystic, who simultaneously embraced earthly pleasures with an almost reckless abandon. She was an anarchist spirit, deeply suspicious of all forms of authority, who yet sought communion with God through the established structures of a Sufi brotherhood. She was, in essence, a pioneer of transcultural identity, a relentless seeker of absolute, untrammeled freedom in a world that offered precious little of it, especially to women who dared to defy its most fundamental convention. Her deliberate and consistent adoption of male attire and persona was far more than a mere matter of practical convenience or a theatrical disguise. It was a profound and radical act of self-definition, a conscious strategy to transcend the severe limitations imposed upon her by her gender and her European origins in the context of both colonial and indigenous North African society. In becoming Samamud, she was not necessarily negating her femininity, but rather seeking a form of human expression, a social space that allowed her formidable intellect, her adventurous spirit, and her physical body to move freely and unrestrictedly through the world she had chosen. It was a radical act of liberation, a personal deconstruction of gender roles, one that challenged the binary thinking of her time, and in many ways continues to resonate with and challenge contemporary understandings of gender and identity. Her relationship with the desert itself was equally profound, almost symbiotic. The Sahara was not merely a picturesque or exotic backdrop for her adventures, it was a spiritual landscape, a demanding teacher, a crucible that tested her limits, purified her intentions, and ultimately in a final tragic embrace, claimed her life. She wrote with poignant insight of its terrible sweetness, its unique ability to strip away the superficial, the trivial, the layers of societal conditioning, and reveal the raw, unvarnished essence of existence. In its vast seemingly empty expanses, she discovered a paradoxical fullness of being, a profound connection to something ancient, elemental and eternal. She understood with an intuitive wisdom that the desert demanded surrender, not conquest, humility, not arrogance. And in that act of surrender to its immensity and its power, she found a unique and deeply personal form of liberation. Isabel's engagement with Islam, and particularly with the mystical traditions of Sufism, was an undisputed cornerstone of her adult identity. She was not a dilettante, idly dabbling in exotic spirituality for fashionable effect. Her faith was deeply felt, intellectually grounded through rigorous study of the Quran and Sufi texts, and intricately woven into the very fabric of her daily life and her ethical framework. She saw in Islam, and especially in its Sufi interpretations, a path to spiritual enlightenment that resonated powerfully with her own innate mystical inclinations, and her intense desire for a direct, unmediated experiential knowledge of the divine. Her understanding of the faith was nuanced and sophisticated. She was capable of being critical of what she perceived as hypocrisy, superstition, or excessive rigidity within its practice, just as she was relentlessly critical of the moral failings and cultural limitations of European society. Her faith was a personal covenant, a source of solace and strength in a life filled with hardship and uncertainty. Her writings, those precious fragments that survived the flood and the vagaries of time, remain her most enduring and powerful legacy. Though sometimes fragmented, and often filtered through the editorial choices and biases of others, their intrinsic power is undeniable. They offer a voice that is at once strikingly lyrical and unflinchingly honest, intensely passionate, and deeply introspective. She managed to capture the elusive soul of North Africa, its landscapes, its people, its spiritual atmosphere, with an intimacy and an empathy that few, if any, European writers of her time could ever hope to match. Her work provides a vital counter-narrative to the often condescending, romanticized, or overtly colonialist perspectives that dominated Western literature about the Maghreb in that era. She wrote as much as was possible for someone of her origins, from within, as a participant, a fellow traveler, however flawed and complex her position, not merely as a detached superior observer. The extraordinary life of Isabel Aberhart continues to raise enduring, and often uncomfortable questions about the nature of identity, the elusive meaning of freedom, and the universal human search for meaning in a complex and often contradictory. How does one reconcile the powerful, often conflicting, pulls of different cultures, different worlds, different loyalties? What does it truly mean to be free, and what price must one inevitably pay for that freedom, especially when one is born into a world that seeks to confine and define? How does one navigate the treacherous terrain of faith, passion, human frailty, and societal expectation? These are the very questions that Isabel grappled with throughout her brief, incandescent life, and her courageous, if sometimes self-destructive, attempts to live out her own answer, however unconventional or shocking to her contemporaries, continue to resonate with a profound and unsettling power. She was in so many respects a figure far ahead of her time. Her radical rejection of bourgeois societal norms, her fluid exploration of gender identity and presentation, her profound and respectful immersion in a non-Western culture and religion, these aspects of her life and thought speak to contemporary concerns about multiculturalism, gender studies, and post-colonial discourse, with a surprising and compelling relevance. Yet, she was also undeniably a product of her specific historical era, a fin de siècle romantic in some ways, drawn to the allure of the exotic and the untamed, even as she sought to critique the very colonial enterprise that paradoxically made her sustained presence and her unique experiences in North Africa possible. The image of Isabel Aberhart, the slight, almost boyish young woman dressed in the flowing robes of an Arab man, her intense gaze fixed on some distant desert horizon, her hand perhaps resting on the hilt of a concealed weapon or the worn leather of her saddle, has become iconic. It is an image that speaks powerfully of defiance, of extraordinary courage, of an unyielding, almost desperate, quest for self-realization in its most absolute form. But behind the compelling icon, behind the romantic legend, lies the far more intricate and fascinating reality of a complex human being, full of unresolved contradictions, startling vulnerabilities, and an extraordinary, almost boundless, capacity for empathy, understanding and love. Her short meteoric life was a meteor shower, burning with a fierce, white-hot intensity across the often darkened skies of her time, before vanishing too soon into the enveloping darkness. She sought oblivion, perhaps, as some of her writings suggest, oblivion from the pain of a world that could not easily accommodate her untamed spirit, oblivion from the constraints of her own European heritage. But she also, and just as powerfully, sought connection, and a profound spiritual engagement with that very same world. She found these in fleeting precious moments, in the sun-drenched, wind-swept landscapes of Algeria, among its hospitable and dignified people, and within the contemplative, heart-opening traditions of Islamic mysticism. The Wadi at Ain Sefra, the normally dry riverbed that became an agent of such sudden and violent death, also, in a strange and poignant way, cradled her final story, becoming her unintended tomb. The waters that so brutally took her life, also scattered her word, washing away irreplaceable manuscripts, a poignant metaphor perhaps for a legacy that is itself both immensely powerful and frustratingly dispersed, tantalizingly complete in its vision, yet always leaving one wanting to know more, to grasp the whole that was so much greater than the sum of its surviving parts. The persistent ongoing search for the true Isabelle Aberhart continues, in the careful re-examination of the fragments of her writings, in the historical accounts of those who knew her however briefly, and in the fertile imaginations of those who are irresistibly drawn to her extraordinary, unclassifiable story.
She consciously and deliberately chose a path of radical, uncompromising freedom, a path that inevitably led her through exhilarating, transcendent highs and devastating, soul-crushing lows. She embraced the unknown with open arms, courted danger with an almost casual disregard for her own safety, and lived her life with an intensity that few could ever sustain, and which ultimately consumed her. In doing so, she crafted a life that was, in and of itself, a singular and unforgettable work of art. Raw, passionate, deeply flawed and unforgettably beautiful in its uncompromising authenticity. The desert wind, sighing through the date palms and across the endless dunes, still seems to whisper her name, Sa Mahmoud, the rebel soul, the seeker, who found her truest, most elusive self in the harsh, illuminating embrace of the Sahara. Her brief, incandescent existence stands as a testament to the enduring power of the human spirit to seek its own horizon, to define its own truth, no matter the cost, no matter the odds. Her life was a fleeting, brilliant spark against the vast, indifferent canvas of history, a vivid reminder that the most compelling and memorable lives are often those lived on the very edge of convention, in fervent, unwavering pursuit of an ideal that transcends the mundane, the predictable, the merely ordinary. The silence of the desert holds her secrets, and her words, those precious few that survived the ravages of water and time, continue to beckon new generations to explore the landscape she so passionately loved, both the external, physical ones, and the equally vast, equally challenging internal territories of the human heart and mind. The year was 1812. The relentless sun beat down upon the arid, rock-strewn landscape of what is now southern Jordan. A lone European traveler, his features darkened by exposure, his dress that of an Arab scholar, moved with quiet determination through this unforgiving terrain. He called himself Sheikh Ibrahim ibn Abdallah, a name adopted to cloak his true identity, Johann Ludwig Burckhardt, a young Swiss explorer, Orientalist and scholar. His mission, self-imposed and fraught with peril, was to rediscover a city spoken of only in hushed whispers, a place lost to the Western world for centuries, a legend hidden deep within the formidable mountain ranges of Edom. He had heard tales from local Bedouin tribes of fantastic ruins, concealed within a narrow, impenetrable gorge, a place they held in superstitious awe. His pretext for venturing into this guarded territory was a pious one: to sacrifice a goat at the tomb of Aaron, the brother of Moses, believed to be situated near the mythical city. His Bedouin guide, suspicious yet bound by the customs of hospitality and the lure of payment, led him onward. The path grew increasingly constricted, the towering sandstone cliffs pressing in on either side, their surfaces sculpted by wind and time into fantastical shapes, glowing in hues of rose, crimson, and ochre. They entered a chasm, the Seek, a natural geological fault line, so narrow in places that the sky above was reduced to a mere ribbon of blue. The air grew cooler, the silence profound, broken only by the soft shuffle of their feet on the sandy floor, and the occasional echo of a bird's call. For over a kilometer, this winding, shadowed passage continued, each turn heightening the anticipation, the sense of penetrating a sacred, hidden world. Burckhardt, though outwardly calm, must have felt his heart pound with a mixture of excitement and apprehension. Was this journey a fool's errand, or was he truly on the cusp of a monumental discovery? Then, through a final sliver of darkness, a vision materialized, so unexpected, so breathtakingly beautiful, that it seemed an apparition from another realm. Bathed in the oblique sunlight that managed to penetrate the Sikh's end, a colossal facade emerged, intricately carved directly into the sheer rose-red cliff face. Columns soared, statues occupied niches, and ornate decorations adorned a structure of immense scale and delicate artistry. This was Al-Khazna, the treasury, as the Bedouin called it, believing that pirates or pharaohs had hidden their loot within its urn-shaped finial. Burckhardt stood transfixed, overwhelmed. He knew, with a certainty that resonated deep within his scholarly soul, that he had found it. He was standing before the legendary Petra, the lost caravan city of the Nabateans. He had to feign scholarly detachment, carefully concealing the true magnitude of his emotions from his wary guide, but inwardly he understood the profound significance of this moment. The West had forgotten Petra, but Petra had waited, shrouded in stone and silence. What Burckhardt glimpsed that day was merely the vestibule to a much larger marvel. As he was cautiously guided further, a vast city carved from rock began to reveal itself. Facades of temples, tombs, and dwellings lined the valley, their intricate designs a testament to the skill and artistry of their creators. There were colonnaded streets, a theater capable of seating thousands, and high places of worship cut into the mountain tops, all hewn from the living sandstone. It was a city built not with quarried stone transported and assembled, but sculpted directly from the earth itself, a metropolis that was both architecture and landscape, a monumental fusion of human endeavor and geological wonder. For centuries this magnificent metropolis had thrived, a vibrant hub of commerce and culture, before fading into obscurity, its existence becoming little more than a rumor in the wider world. But who were the master builders of this astonishing city? Who possessed the vision, the engineering prowess, and the artistic sensibility to create such a marvel in the heart of the desert? The creators of Petra were the Nabateans, an ancient Arab people whose origins, like the city itself, were for a long time shrouded in a degree of mystery. Emerging from the mists of history, as nomadic pastoralists in the deserts of northern Arabia and the southern Levant, they gradually transitioned from a mobile existence to becoming shrewd masters of trade and settled architects of stone. By the 4th century BCE, they were already noted by Greek historians for their independence, their resilience, and their control over the lucrative trade routes that crisscrossed the arid landscapes. The key to Nabatean prosperity lay in their strategic location and their remarkable ingenuity. They controlled the vital arteries of the ancient incense trade, a commerce of immense value in the classical world. Frankincense and myrrh, harvested from the distant southern regions of the Arabian Peninsula and the Horn of Africa, were highly prized for religious ceremonies, perfumes and medicinal purposes throughout the Mediterranean basin, Egypt, and the Near East. The Nabateans, with their intimate knowledge of the desert, their ability to locate and manage scarce water resources, and their diplomatic and military skills, established themselves as the indispensable middlemen in this rich trade. Caravans laden with precious resins, spices from India, silks from China, and other exotic goods traversed the perilous desert routes, under Nabatean protection, converging on Petra, their ingeniously chosen capital. Petra's location was a stroke of strategic genius. Nestled within a seemingly impenetrable ring of sandstone mountains, accessible primarily through the narrow Sikh, it was a natural fortress, easily defended. But more than its defensibility, Petra's true miracle was its water. In one of the driest regions on Earth, the Nabateans became masters of hydraulic engineering. They carved intricate systems of channels, cisterns, dams and conduits, to capture and conserve every precious drop of rainwater. These sophisticated water systems not only sustained a large urban population, but also irrigated terraced gardens, transforming the arid valley into a surprisingly green and fertile oasis. This mastery over water was the lifeblood of Petra, allowing it to flourish where others would have perished. As their wealth grew, so did the grandeur of their capital. The Nabateans, influenced by the Hellenistic cultures they encountered through trade, particularly Ptolemaic Egypt and Seleucid Syria, began to transform Petra from a well-defended trading post into a magnificent city. They were not mere imitators. They absorbed and adapted these foreign artistic and architectural influences, blending them with their own indigenous traditions, to create a unique Nabatean style. Their most distinctive achievement was their rock-cut architecture. Instead of building upwards with blocks, they carved inwards, sculpting elaborate facades directly into the soft sandstone cliffs.
The treasury with its Corinthian capitals and mythological figures, and the later, even larger, Ad-Dir, the monastery, perched high on a mountain overlooking the city, are prime examples of this extraordinary technique. These were not just functional structures, they were monumental expressions of power, piety, and artistic vision. Nabatean society was complex, and apparently well organized. While initially nomadic, they developed a settled urbanized culture in Petra, and other smaller settlements. They were ruled by kings, whose names and reigns are recorded in inscriptions, and on coins. Figures like Aretas III, who expanded Nabatean territory and influence, and Aretas IV, under whom Petra reached its zenith of prosperity and architectural development, presided over a thriving kingdom. Their religion was polytheistic, centered on a pantheon of deities, with Dashara, the chief male god, often associated with mountains and symbolized by an uncarved block of stone, and Aluza, a powerful goddess equated with Aphrodite or Venus, holding prominent position. Other deities like Manat and Alat were also worshipped. The elaborate tombs that dominate Petra's landscape, with their imposing facades, were not merely burial places, but houses for eternity, reflecting a belief in an afterlife, and the importance of honoring ancestors. These tombs, often more grandiose than the dwellings of the living, underscore the Nabatean preoccupation with the sacred and the eternal. Their language was a form of Aramaic, known as Nabatean Aramaic, written in a distinctive script that eventually evolved into the Arabic script. Inscriptions found throughout Petra and other Nabatean sites provide valuable, though often tantalizingly brief, insights into their laws, religious dedications, and personal names. They were a literate people, engaged not only in commerce but also in cultural pursuits. Their pottery, delicate, finely painted bowls and cups, is another hallmark of their artistic skill. Petra's golden age spanned from roughly the 1st century BCE to the 1st century CE. During this period it was a cosmopolitan metropolis, a bustling crossroads where diverse cultures met and mingled. Traders from across the ancient world, Arabs, Greeks, Romans, Egyptians, Jews and others, would have thronged its colonnaded streets, bartering goods, exchanging ideas and contributing to the city's vibrant atmosphere. The Great Theater, capable of seating up to 8,000 spectators, would have hosted performances, and its temples and shrines would have echoed with prayers and rituals in various tongues. The city was a testament to the Nabateans' ability to thrive at the intersection of commerce, culture and diplomacy. However, the tides of history are ever shifting. The decline of Petra was a gradual process, brought about by a confluence of factors. One of the most significant was the shift in trade routes. The Romans, ever pragmatic and efficient, began to favor maritime routes for the spice and incense trade, particularly sea routes up the Red Sea and overland through Egypt. This bypassed the traditional land-based caravan routes that the Nabateans had so masterfully controlled, slowly siphoning off the commercial lifeblood of their kingdom. In 1006 CE, the Roman Empire, under Emperor Trajan, formally annexed the Nabatean kingdom, incorporating it into the newly created province of Provincia Arabia. While this did not mean an immediate end to Petra's prosperity, indeed, the Romans built a new colonnaded street and other structures. It marked the end of Nabatean independence. Petra became one of several important cities in Roman Arabia, but its singular preeminence began to wane. Over time, other cities in the region, such as Bostra, which became the provincial capital, and Gerasa, Jerash, grew in importance, further eclipsing Petra. Natural disasters also played a role. A major earthquake in 3063 CE caused significant damage to the city, toppling buildings and disrupting its vital water systems. While Petra was rebuilt to some extent, it likely never fully recovered its former glory. The rise of Christianity, and later Islam, also led to changes in the religious landscape, with some Nabatean temples and tombs being repurposed as churches. By the early Islamic period, Petra was still inhabited, but it was a much diminished settlement. During the Crusader period, it was briefly occupied and fortified, but after the Crusaders departed, Petra slipped further into obscurity, its grand structures slowly succumbing to the encroaching desert and the erosive power of wind and infrequent flash flood. It became a place of legend for the outside world, known only to the local Bedouin tribes, who continued to live in and around its ruins, guarding its secrets with a mixture of reverence and fear. It was into this forgotten world that Johann Ludwig Burckhardt ventured in. His rediscovery was not a discovery for the Bedouin, of course, for whom Petra had never been truly lost, but for the Western world, which had lost track of the city since the late Roman, or early Byzantine period. Burckhardt's visit and his subsequent detailed report, published posthumously, were a revelation. He had undertaken his journey with immense personal risk. Traveling as a lone European in these regions was extraordinarily dangerous. Discovery of his true identity could have resulted in robbery, enslavement or death. His disguise as an Arab scholar, his fluency in Arabic, and his deep understanding of Islamic customs were essential for his survival and the success of his mission. He spent only a few hours in Petra, acutely aware that lingering too long or showing excessive interest would arouse the suspicions of his guide. He meticulously observed what he could, making mental notes and discreet sketches, understanding that he was a fleeting visitor in a place that demanded years of study. His report to the African Association in London, a society dedicated to geographical discovery, electrified the scholarly community and opened the floodgates for future exploration. Following Burckhardt's pioneering visit, a trickle, then a stream of Western explorers, artists and archaeologists began to make the arduous journey to Petra. Figures like Léon de la Barde and Louis-Maurice Adolphe Linant de Belafon in the 1820s produced the first detailed drawings and maps, further captivating the European imagination. Throughout the 19th and 20th centuries, systematic archaeological excavations began to uncover the city's secrets, revealing the complexity of its urban layout, the sophistication of its water systems, and the richness of its material culture. Work by scholars such as Gustav Dahlmann, George Horsfield, Agnes Conway, and later a host of international teams, has pieced together a more comprehensive picture of Nabatean civilization and the history of Petra. Archaeological work continues to this day, constantly yielding new discoveries. Sophisticated remote sensing technologies and further excavations have revealed hidden temples, agricultural terraces, suburban settlements, and even more intricate details of their water management systems, including sophisticated networks designed to mitigate the destructive power of flash floods. An irony, given the city's eventual partial destruction by such events. The sheer extent of Nabatean engineering, their ability to shape and master their challenging environment, continues to us. Each new find adds another layer to our understanding of this remarkable people. The preservation of Petra in the modern era presents significant challenges. The soft sandstone, while easy to carve, is also highly susceptible to erosion from wind, rain and flash flood. The immense pressure of tourism, while bringing vital economic benefits to the region, also takes its toll on the fragile structures and the delicate desert environment. Striking a balance between providing access to this World Heritage Site and ensuring its long-term survival is a constant concern for the Jordanian authorities and international conservation organizations. Efforts are ongoing to stabilize crumbling facades, manage water runoff, and promote sustainable tourism practices. Petra's enduring legacy lies not only in its breathtaking beauty, but also in what it tells us about the human capacity for adaptation, ingenuity and artistic expression. The Nabateans were a people who literally carved a civilization out of the rock, transforming a barren desert into a flourishing oasis, and a vital center of global trade. Their city stands as a powerful testament to their resilience, their commercial acumen, and their unique cultural vision. It is a reminder that great civilizations can rise in the most unlikely of places, and that their achievements can endure for millennia, even after they themselves have faded from the stage of history. The journey through the Sikh remains one of an unparalleled experience, a dramatic unveiling that prepares the visitor for the wonders within. The sudden appearance of the treasury is a moment that continues to inspire awe, just as it must have for Burckhardt 2 centuries ago. But Petra is so much more than just the treasury. It is a vast necropolis, a sprawling urban center, a sacred landscape. Walking its ancient rock-hewn paths, one can almost hear the echoes of the past, the murmur of different languages in the marketplace, the chanting of priests in the temples, the rumble of caravan camels laden with exotic goods. The city's nickname, the Rose City, though often attributed to a line from a poem by John William Burgon, a rose-red city half as old as time, beautifully captures the warm shifting hues of its sandstone cliffs, which glow with an ethereal light at sunrise and sunset. It speaks to the delicate beauty that coexists with the monumental scale of its architecture. Petra is a place where the raw power of nature and the refined artistry of humankind are inextricably intertwined, each enhancing the majesty of the other. The story of the Nabateans is a reminder of the interconnectedness of the ancient world, where trade routes served not only as conduits for goods, but also for ideas, technologies and cultural influences. They were not an isolated people but active participants in the vibrant tapestry of civilizations that stretched from the Mediterranean to India and beyond. Their ability to navigate these complex interactions, to absorb and adapt external influences, while retaining their own distinct identity, was a key to their success. As we reflect on Petra, we are also reminded of the cyclical nature of history, the rise and fall of empires and civilization. For centuries Petra was a beacon of prosperity and innovation. Then gradually, inexorably, the forces of change, shifting economies, political realignments, natural disasters, led to its decline and eventual abandonment, by all but the local Bedouin. Its rediscovery by the West was, in a sense, a reawakening, a restoration of this lost chapter to the broader narrative of human history. The silence that now envelops much of Petra is a silence filled with story. Every carved facade, every worn step, every shard of pottery speaks of the lives that were lived here, the dreams that were pursued, the gods that were worshipped. It is a place that invites contemplation, a place to ponder the passage of time, and the enduring legacy of human creativity. The Nabateans may have vanished as a distinct political entity, but their spirit lives on in the magnificent city they carved from the desert rock, a timeless monument to their ingenuity and their artistry, a true wonder of the ancient and modern world. The intricate details of their water channels, the grandeur of their royal tombs, the sheer audacity of carving a city into a cliff face, these continue to inspire architects, engineers, artists, and dreamers alike. A profound echo from a civilization that mastered the desert and left an indelible mark on the sands of time. The desert winds whisper their tales, and the stones of Petra stand as silent, eloquent witnesses to their extraordinary achievement.